welcome to episode 29 of iHorror, otherwise known as season 2, episode 7, I think. I keep track the other way, but if you keep track that way, season 2, episode 7. I'm your host, James J. Edwards, and with me yet again, as always, is Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
I'm feeling very sleepy.
Sleepy again? You were sleepy last time, too. You up late?
Well, I'll get into it.
We don't want to do half the show without Korea again. Speaking of Korea, your other host, John Korea. How you doing, Korea?
I'm doing well, and apparently, from the sounds of it, I thought I was the resident party animal, but I think Jacob's going for that title now. You up so? Why are you up so late, Jacob? I'm curious too now.
Yeah. Let's get this started. What have you been doing this weekend that keeps you up all night?
I was at Midsummer Scream, the kind of haunted house convention that hits Long Beach every year.
Cool. What's going on there?
Well, a lot. I was there yesterday, and it's really cool. They do basically previews of haunted houses and amusements that are coming in September, October for the Halloween season. So mostly local stuff, stuff like Not Scary Farm and Halloween Horror Nights have panels, but like the local haunts set up their own kind of mini haunts where they show off some of the stuff they got planned, and it's actually really cool. Despite limited locations and size. There was this great one that was actually it was called like Fear Fest 89, and it's like a haunted horror movie festival, and you go into all these different rooms, and each room is based off a different horror movie. Like there was like a Shining room, there was a Friday the 13th room, there was an alien corridor where aliens jumped at you.
Why was it 1989? Why'd they call it that?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's just a good year, and let's see, there was also like a haunted Mesoamerican temple one, and there was an insane asylum one. They covered all the different bases, and yeah, and again, you just got to give props to these haunters who are so dedicated and setting up in the summer and, kind of giving people a taste of what to expect in the fall.
It's a lifestyle. Those guys are kind of the unsung heroes because I don't imagine there's a ton of money in doing that. So they do it for the love of creating these haunted houses. I mean,
pretty much.
And I think it shows too.
Oh, especially out here in the valley of Los Angeles, out in Burbank, they go all out. There's local maps that you can get for free where it's just maps for people's lawns who have like the best haunts, and it's really
nice.
Neat. Yeah, highly suggest it up in Magnolia Park.
Oh yeah, great area. And aside from that, I also got to do a well, you guys know that movie coming out, Ready or Not, with Samara Weaving?
Yeah.
They had a Ready or Not experience where you get to play hide and seek with mass killers, and basically you get they put you in this room. You got 20 seconds to hide, and then these masked madmen will try and catch you. And it's kind of like a tag football thing where you got like the little ropes around you, and you got 2 lives. If they catch you twice, you're out. And you're doing this by yourself? No. It's with a group.
Oh, okay.
And they have like a whole setup so you can hide under tables, beds. Like there's little caves. So it's kind of like laser tag, but just without the lasers.
But the killers, they know every hiding place, so you're at a serious disadvantage.
Oh yeah. Although I managed to get the drop on one of them. Like I did that thing where there was a bed, and I messed up the bed to make it look like somebody was hiding under it. Then I hid under a table at the door so that when the killer came in, I'd run out.
Oh, okay.
I played a lot of survival horror games like Resident Evil. Like that, those taught me very well. And aside from that, hit the Halloween Horror Nights panel. They got good stuff coming as always. And always fun to see kind of the wares people are showing off in like the big room, like fog machines, different types of props, special effects. And I also got to meet one of my childhood heroes, Bill Kopp, who is the co-creator of a bunch of cartoons. Like he did Eek the Cat with Savage Steve Holland.
Well, in other news, I think Korea and I... first of all, Korea saw Midsommar. So let's get your thoughts on Midsommar.
Midsommar.
What'd you think?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, It was actually funny because Lindsay and I went and we did the I'm not watching anything for it. Like, I think I watched the teaser once and then like had done a pretty good job of avoiding everything. And so we both loved it. What a just utterly destructive beginning. Like, that whole first act is just so hard. And
somebody in one of the Facebook groups I'm in was asking, he said, hey, Hereditary was really triggering for me because I have, family issues. Is Midsommar like that? And I'm like, just read spoilers about the first 10 minutes and then you're good. Because it's all set up. But man, is it heavy.
Yeah, no, I was on the edge of my seat that whole first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. Like, it's been a while since I left a movie with like so many mixed emotions, just like happy but also terrified, and just like it just on so many levels it works and pulls. Like, man, that director really needs to, like, I wonder if he's ever gonna make a happy movie. Like, his films are always about like, or at least these two are really about like dealing with heavy loss.
I mean, if you look at Ari Aster's whole filmography, because he's got 2 features, but he did a bunch of shorts, and there's some messed up shorts.
Yeah, they are.
Are you okay, Ari? Is this a reach out at this point, bud? I don't know, but he might just be like, like Lars von Trier. It's just like, no, I'm just gonna make brutal movies all the time. It's like, all right, okay, that's how you exercise things.
He's an artist.
He was on the A24 podcast with Robert Eggers, who did The Witch, The Vitch, and he seems like a pretty normal guy in interviews, and so does Robert Eggers, actually, to be honest. But when you think the imaginations that these guys have, what comes out of their minds, it's the quiet ones that run deep, I guess.
Well, it just feels like you no longer have to, I don't know, because when you think of like movies that are like really out there and really weird, you kind of think that the filmmaker is going to be like a David Lynch or John Waters type character, where they're just where you're going to be like, oh, okay, I can see why you make those type of movies, but we're not really seeing that a whole lot with this generation. Although I would love the next person who, talks like this and says stuff like, you can't watch a movie on a fucking screen, For those who don't know, that was my terrible David Lynch impression.
What about Crawl? We both saw Crawl as well.
Finally.
I'll tell you right now, I loved it.
Yes.
I had so much fun with Crawl.
That was the only thing I hated about Crawl was the audience I went with, because we had a surround sound of people talking, and someone brought their fucking dog to the theater, which I didn't even know that was allowed. So that one scene in the beginning where the dog barks, all of a sudden this dog is like barking at the screen next to, like, behind me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? But other than that, fantastic. I had so much fun with it, and I really liked how the lead actress, she wasn't a damsel in distress at all. Nor did they make her some over-the-top survivalist. Like, they were just used logic and basic survival skills to, like, do what they could to get through, and I loved that. She
reminded me of Blake Lively in The Shallows. She was just like a whatever it takes kind of a thing, but she had to save her dad as well for most of the movie. My one gripe, and this is not a gripe, I know exactly why they did it, and I actually agree with why they did it, but it's like they wanted the audience to forget that alligators could go on land. Because there's that one part where she's swimming, and she gets out of the water and the alligator just goes away. It's like, that he can just follow you on land, right? And I guess that we were supposed to, the alligator's like, oh, if only I had legs. Wait a minute.
Oh, man.
No, I had so much fun. It was just a good old-fashioned, creature feature, pretty much.
And it's also a great disaster movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's great to see a creature feature actually be treated with skill, because so many creature feature these days are just, like, straight to sci-fi, terrible CGI, like, just snooze fest for me. But this one was, like, it was well-crafted. That whole convenience store scene was, I thought, hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It gave just a taste of Alexandria Age's Piranha 3D vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If only for a scene.
Yeah.
Oh, I also saw Jennifer Kent's new movie. She did The Babadook.
Yeah.
And her new movie is called The Nightingale.
Oh yeah.
How was
And it's really good. It's really good, but it's kind of questionably horror. It's more horrific than horror because it's about an Irish woman who is a slave I believe she's in Australia, and she basically gets brutalized. And I mean, there's horrifying depictions of, you name it, rape, murder. I mean, it's a pretty brutal movie, and it's unflinching. So, I mean, if you are sensitive to things like that, you might want to skip it. But it is, at its root, it's just a revenge movie. But it is so much more than that, I was a little surprised that it was so unflinching, given that it was a female director. But it's not exploitative. Like it's not like I Spit on Your Grave, where you just are crying for the rape scene to end. You're like, oh, come on, this girl's been through enough. But it is really, it's just really brutal, and I think it's really real too, which is kind of part of what makes it disturbing. But it's really good. And then I also saw a movie called Them That Follow, which is about it's about an Appalachian quote church, although it's more of a cult. And Walton Goggins is the preacher. And this church, the way that they do things is they'll put a poisonous snake on you, and if this snake will slither around on you, and if it bites you, I guess you're a sinner, and if it doesn't, you're clean. And there's way more to it. Like Walton Goggins' daughter is betrothed to marry one kid, but has feelings for another. And then there's Olivia Colman is in it as well. And I don't want to give away too much about it, because it is kind of it's one of those better, best to experience it yourself. But and again, it's kind of borderline horror. But if you have a phobia of snakes, you will be terrified of this movie.
You had me sold at Walton Goggins as a preacher.
Yeah, we need a Walton Goggins alert whenever he's got something coming.
Yeah,
he's terrific. He actually steals the movie, because he is. Yeah, I mean he's the fire and brimstone, preacher of this thing. So it's cool. But also what I saw, and this one I know all three of us have been waiting for, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes.
Did you see it, Korea?
No.
I know Jacob did.
God
Oh, okay.
I've seen it twice.
Here's the good news. It's not really spoilable. I mean, it is, but we won't get into that. But it's one of those movies where, like, it's never boring, but stuff is happening, and you're like, is any of this matter in the grand scheme of this? It's classic Tarantino, where, you've got, DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character just cruising around LA, and you're like, is this going to tie together? Is this going to tie together? And, some of it does, some of it doesn't, but it's all just classic slice of life Tarantino. Yeah. And then it culminates in this third act that is insane. Insane.
Also, I think this may be Tarantino's funniest movie. Like, I laughed so hard during a certain scene that I went hoarse.
Well, you're right. It is one of his funnier ones, but I went back and watched Inglourious Bastards the other day, and that is hilarious.
Oh,
for a movie about Nazis. But there's one shot that just killed me in Inglourious Bastards that I don't remember seeing before. But there's one shot where the camera kind of is like a lower angle of Hitler, and he's talking, and then there's someone painting a mural of Hitler on the wall behind him.
Yeah, I remember that scene.
The visual gag is hilarious. I don't remember the mural of Hitler behind him. Maybe every other time I've seen it, I've been just so engrossed in Hitler. But the mural that's being painted of him behind him is because that's the image of Hitler we have, that he's this egomaniac who is gonna have a mural of him on his wall.
Right.
But yeah, no, it was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was fun, and I do feel like it kind of just grazed into horror, because I guess this isn't really so much of a spoiler, but there is a scene at the family's compound, and it gave me a real Hills Have Eyes type of vibe.
I mean, yeah, it does deal with the Manson family, and so it does delve into that, and that Spawn Ranch scene. is pretty tense.
It's so intense.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. With Dakota Fanning as Squeaky Fromm, and Bruce Dern as George Spahn.
Yeah.
Which is the part that Burt Reynolds was supposed to play.
Yeah.
And I guess James Marsden's was supposed to play Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, but that part got cut. And I also heard that there was a part for Tim Roth that ended up on the cutting room floor too. So when Tarantino puts out the 3.5-hour cut of Once Upon a Time, and actually I heard he's working on a 4-hour cut with Netflix, which maybe they're going to cut it. They're going to cut it into 4 parts, like Hateful Eight, maybe.
Yeah, I heard they were going to do it kind of like with Hateful Eight, where they turned it into kind of a mini-series. A mini-series,
yeah. And I guess the Tim Roth part will be in that one, which is great because, Tim Roth and Samuel L. Jackson are the two guys. I'm like, where are they? And I swear there's one scene where I think Samuel L. Jackson's in the background of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I didn't notice.
Well, either that or I imagined it, but there's a lookalike of him. But and he looks like he's in makeup, kind of like Django Unchained kind of style makeup. But anyway, all right, let's move on to our subgenre, which is also kind of a special subgenre. What do we got, Jacob?
We are doing this podcast early August now, and sadly, it is in the wake of the passing of one of the greats. Actor Rutger Hauer has passed away, so we decided to talk about some of his movies, which a lot fell into genre.
Yeah, I think when people think of Rutger Hauer, they automatically think Blade Runner.
Oh, of course.
Because he was, honestly, he kind of makes the movie, his
really does.
Villain. But it wasn't just Blade Runner. He made a career of playing villains that were often far more interesting and charismatic than the heroes. And another example of that is I just watched last night for the first time in probably 20 years, Nighthawks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
love
he
that movie.
he plays this terrorist and Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams are the cops that are trying to catch him. And Sylvester Stallone, he gives the performance of a potted plant. He's like, oh, geez, don't do it. But Rutger Hauer is just so devious and evil in this movie. And it's like when you're on the scenes with Sylvester Stallone and Billy D. Williams, you're like, come on, go back to the Rutger Hauer scenes.
Oh, and he's also got such a classic 80s bad guy name. He's called, was it
Wolfguard?
Wolf or the Wolf?
Yeah, well, it's like Wolfguard or something like that. Is what it. But he was based on the Jackal, the real life terrorist. So they kind of,
right, Jackal,
that,
Wolf.
But at one point the cops find a picture of him, and this is all first act stuff. The cops find a picture of him on someone that he killed. So he goes and gets plastic surgery so he doesn't look like that picture anymore. I mean, that's the kind of dude that he plays in Nighthawks.
Yeah, and also his character has a weakness for disco clubs.
Yes.
Like and you get to see Rutger Hauer do his thing on the dance floor.
Well, he has a weakness for disco clubs because that's where he meets women, and then he hides all of his arsenal of weapons at their house.
Yeah, like he seduces women and hides out at their place. But also he does dance with them. So
yes, he does.
So you do get to see Rutger Hauer dance in a disco.
Yep, he cuts a rug. What about you guys? What are your favorite Rutger Hauer movies?
Okay, well, I'm just going to jump right into it. Hobo with a Shotgun is a personal favorite Rutger Hauer movie because, it's just on the premise alone, it could have just been like, just a low tier, low budget, like grindhouse throwback, but it and I hate to use this term, but it does feel kind of elevated because of not like Rutger Hauer's performance as the hobo. Like, he's only known as the hobo. Like, he has this epic monologue, where he talks to like these newborn babies in this maternity ward, and talks about just how crappy the world is, and there's a lot to dissect out of there. But yeah, just and kind of talking about like like he could either make a better future or they can end up like him, a hobo with a shotgun. And
a hobo with a shotgun.
Yeah,
Hobo with a shotgun's hilarious because he's the hero of the movie,
he is.
But his character is still kind of a villain. So he's
well,
like,
I wouldn't say a villain. It's just
well, an anti-hero.
He's a wacko. Because, I mean, the people he's fighting are way worse.
Yeah.
It's the other thing, too. Like, the guy who plays the bad guy, the Drake, is played by Brian Downey, who's a Canadian actor. And funnily enough, they actually worked together on a movie years ago. Like, there was this sci-fi series called Lex. And there was this basically they did the first season's like a mini series of 4 movies, and one of them, Eating Pattern. It's funny because it's a role reversal, because in that movie Rutger Hauer was the bad guy and Brian Downey was the good guy. Then they do Hobo with a Shotgun, the roles are reversed.
Cool. What about you, Korea? What's your Rutger Hauer?
Well, first of all, I can't talk about Hobo with a Shotgun without mentioning the greatest line for that movie, where the guy is doing some bad guy stuff, and he says something about Mother Teresa, and then Rutger Hauer just starts beating the shit out of him with his sock full of change, and he's like, "Don't say that about Mother Teresa. She's a goddamn saint." You know.
Yes.
But actually, the Rutger Hauer I want to mention is one I finally watched in lieu of the news, which is Split Second. For those who don't know, Split Second, that was early 90s Rutger Hauer, so when he was doing a lot of direct-to-video stuff. And Split Second is awesome. It's cyberpunk, it's fringe horror, there's actual horror, it's classic Rutger Hauer plays a cop on the edge who is probably crazy, but for some reason they still let him have a badge and a gun. He's hunting down the man who killed his partner, but he also hooked up with his deceased partner's wife, who's Kim Cattrall, which Kim Cattrall with short black hair.
And also he's got a new partner who's by the book.
Yeah, he's got a new partner that's not only by the book, but he's a bookworm. And Rutger Hauer, yeah, he doesn't drink anymore, but boy does he love his coffee and sugar, specifically chocolate. Oh, did I mention the guy that killed his partner is a cult mutant alien Venom ripoff? Like, it's weird because, like, at first it tries to be like, oh yeah, no, it's a serial killer, but then it very quickly is like, oh no, it's an occult thing, and then like by the time you get to the third act, it's like, no, this is a creature. This is a creature feature.
You're one step away from werewolf at that point.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it went through so many script changes from when it was like first written to the final product that like you could tell that they were trying to go in a few different directions with it, and yet the film is better because of it, because it is, again, it's cyberpunk, but it also is really funny at points. Has some really solid jokes
also,
in there.
Doesn't it take place in a flooded version of Chicago in the future or something?
Yeah, it does. Or is it London?
Maybe it was London. I can't remember what. I think it was London, but it's in the future because climate change has melted the ice cap, so most of it's flooded.
So yeah, everyone's walking around in ankle deep water, but like it's London, but it's like very clearly not shot in London. Yeah. Just a few aerial shots of like the London Bridge and stuff tied together. It's just a really fun time, and honestly, the villain is a better screen adaptation of Venom than Venom was too. And the final fight scene it's so much fun because again, it's Rutger Hauer fighting a mutant Venom ripoff, which is awesome.
Now, right now, our whole audience is screaming at their podcast players, what about The Hitcher?
Oh, yeah, we were going to talk about The Hitcher. We
were going to get there. I'm just making it now. The Hitcher,
we just wanted to tease,
is another one of those where the villain is easily the most interesting thing about the movie, and it's all because of Rutger Hauer. I mean, C. Thomas Howell. I mean, he's a step above Potted Plant, but he is like that. Oh shucks, you know. And I mean, Jennifer Jason Leigh is great, but then if you've seen it, you know what happens to her. But it's one of those movies where like just when you think that C. Thomas Howell's character has gotten away and it's all going to be okay, then a truck appears in the rearview mirror and you know who's driving that truck. It's like Duel if Spielberg had given the driver of the semi a face. It would have been Rutger Hauer, in The Hitcher.
Yeah, I love The Hitcher just because he's almost like the Terminator. He plays this guy hitchhiker named John Ryder, and he's just
a made up name,
of course.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. Like he's kind of like the Joker. He's got no backstory. He's got no connections or anything. He just appears and creates chaos, and. He's like so determined and single-minded. Now that he's after this kid, like he is like following him across the country.
He's not after him to kill him though. He's playing with him, and if you see the movie, you know how he's playing with him. But yeah, he's there's a reason he doesn't just kill him and be done with it. It's cat and mouse.
Yeah. So and it makes it even more intense because again, it's just such a powerful performance, and just every time he appears, it's just it fills you with dread.
What other Rutger Hauer's cool?
Also, I should add, I'm going to a Rutger Hauer triple feature next Saturday at the Egyptian, because they're doing a whole series of Rutger Hauer movies next weekend at the Egyptian Theater, and it's a terror triple feature of The Hitcher, Nighthawks, and Hobo with a Shotgun, all in 35mm. So super stoked to see that.
So jealous. I understand that the Egyptians doing a Rutger Hauer series out of Morium, but of course they would do a Rutger Hauer series when I go to leave for 5 weeks.
Damn.
The timing.
So let's move on from Rutger. Let's first moment of silence for him.
Yeah, moment of silence.
Let's move on to our topic, what prompted this topic was, and without spoiling anything, it was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because it's based, all the characters are fictitious except for the Manson family and Sharon Tate. But then you've got, and also Bruce Lee's in it, and hey, maybe Rick and Cliff are the only two fictitious people in it. But anyway, it plays with real people, so you get this idea that it is a true story, but then obviously it isn't, because anybody who's seen Inglourious Bastards knows that Tarantino plays with history. He rewrites history for his own purposes, and it actually makes the movies better. But kind of got me thinking about all of these movies that are based on a true story, and how much leeway do these movies are they given when they say that, okay, based on a true story? And they say based on a true story to sell tickets and to get people in the seats and renting it. So the example that I came up with To Korea, and I know that he's got a lot to say about this, because we've already kind of touched on an earlier episode, was the Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
The Amityville Horror basically has been proven as a hoax. The author of the book sat down with the Lutzes and, they drank a couple bottles of wine and came up with this crazy, far-fetched, nutso, not really an Indian burial ground. It's like an Indian where they ditched their Indians, when they were crazy, and then there was
an exile ground.
Yes, an exile ground. But then the DeFeos were actually, that was legit murders. They happened in this house, and that might have been the little spark. So there's your kernel of truth in the based on a true story. But they also brought in the Warrens to look at the house, and they swore it was haunted, even though it's been debunked as a hoax. And don't get me wrong, the original Amityville Horror I love as a movie, but is it really ethical for them to say it's based on a true story? What do you guys think?
Well, just when you first proposed this, it's based on a true story. It's not just a horror thing. You got your dramas, you got your sports, you got your music biopics. It's all around, and it's weird because other genres they get trashed for moving stuff. How so many people were angry with Bohemian Rhapsody with moving around timelines on Freddie's life and stuff like that for the purpose of narrative, and yet horror, you have something where it's based on a true story, but it might have one thing. Prime example is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, based on true events. The only true thing that about Texas Chainsaw Massacre was that there was someone who murdered people and then used their dead bodies as taxidermy. Ed Gein. Everything else about that movie was fabricated. There was like this one small factoid.
Silence of the Lambs is a better representation of Ed Gein than Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And also, Psycho was also inspired by Ed Gein.
Yeah,
but they never said it outright.
Yeah,
exactly. And so what? So it's that whole realm of like, there's more leeway, and there's not so much. When it comes to stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's not a whole lot of ethical, like, stuff behind it, because you're not really messing with people's lives. But when it comes to some movies and the books, like especially with what the Warrens do, there's some like real life consequences that happen with stretching the truth and fabricating a lot of it. And so like you said, the DeFeo murders actually happened. These people were actually murdered, and this is a very specific case that they bring up in the Amityville horror series, which, again, how many movies are there?
Oh, jeez.
Oh, God,
I think
like
we've
20.
lost count. There's one, a new one called Amityville Mount Misery Road or something. Basically now, people are just throwing the word Amityville onto anything because they can, and there's a built-in audience. So
yeah, like I was actually at the Shockwaves panel yesterday, and they were talking about haunted houses, and they were talking about, like how Amityville is an actual place in Long Island, but it's so associated with that haunting. It's like if you say Amityville with something, it's like, oh, you mean, oh, it's haunted, or it's like, oh, it's haunted house. So Amityville just has that association, and Amityville is not a copyright. Or like using the word Amityville in your movie is not copyrighted, so you can so many people can just throw in Amityville blank, and you got an Amityville movie.
Amityville, it's about time.
Yes, Amityville toaster.
We should call the podcast Eye on Amityville.
Right?
You think people would listen?
I don't know, maybe, or just Amityville Eye on Horror.
No. What about the ones that are complete, that they don't even pretend to be true, except they do, like the Blair Witch Project. They don't actually tell you this is based on a true story, but they say in October of 1994 these kids went into the forest. A year later their footage was found. It's not technically saying this is true,
right?
But it's telling you all this happened. So where there's a thin line between crafting a narrative and creating a documentary, which is essentially what the Blair Witch Project is. It's just a documentary that follows their narrative.
Which I think, honestly, especially at this point, since the market is so oversaturated with based on a true story, and it's like, wait, how is this based on a true story if you have fucking werewolves or a goober monster or whatever? Like, there's a certain point where it's like, it's based on a true story. There really was a woman named Shelley. And I knew Shelley. It was my aunt Shelley. So this all happened to her? No. She just exists. Like, there's just a certain point where when you see based on a true story, you're immediately taken out of it, and you're like, this isn't realistic. But movies like Blair Witch really are able to craft that without, because if Blair Witch said based on a true story, I would immediately be like, is it though? But because of how they crafted the mythology and with the extra documentary and the TV special and all that stuff, website. They don't have to tell you it's real. They showed you this is.
That's actually a good point. They show you that it's real, so you take for granted that it's real, even though it wasn't. But you just accept it because of how it's put together.
And we also have to look back at when it came out, because that was back in 1999, so that was like when the internet was really starting to catch on, and it was like one of the greatest marketing campaigns of all time. So that was the thing. Like they didn't really say it was based on a true story, but they presented enough evidence of it being a true story that a lot of people actually thought it was a real thing.
Audiences were more gullible back then because it wasn't the first found footage movie, but for all intents and purposes, it was the first found footage movie. It's the first one that people bought hook, line, and sinker. And it's kind of a shame because there's never going to be another Blair Witch Project. Like Paranormal Activity kind of came close, but I don't think anybody actually thought, this one was real. It was just a really well-made found footage, but you couldn't suspend your disbelief, whereas the Blair Witch Project, you're like, oh my God, these poor people.
Until a month later when they hit the talk show circuit.
But that goodwill is now gone. The Blair Witch Project guys ruined it for everyone else. But did they really ruin it? Because, 1 out of every 10, if maybe even less, found footage movies is actually worth watching. Although I still watch all of them because I'm a sucker for it.
Ooh, sucker for found footage. I'm sorry, bud.
Same. It's still got merits.
It does. And again, I will always say there are some really good ones out there. Willow Creek. I will always plug Willow Creek. And that's another good one where it doesn't go, this is a true story, but it felt real. And I think it's better. I don't know, what's one of the classic rules of film is it's better to show than tell, rather than have like someone explicitly go, oh no, she's dead. And then like, it's better to just show like, oh shit, that character's dead. There's a body over there, What
about The Legend of Boggy Creek? Because that was actually presented as a documentary. It's almost like a Leonard Nimoy in search of, David L. Walper presents kind of a thing where, and the legend of the folk monster is real. They kind of just crafted this faux documentary about it. So again, I remember seeing The Legend of Boggy Creek when I was little. It was on like KTLA or, something. And it was terrifying because I was like, oh my God, this monster exists and it's not Bigfoot, because it kind of is Bigfoot. But
that's one thing, especially when it comes to based on true story, found footage or documentary things. It's hard to say that this is real when you recognize actors, isn't it? Like, oh, that's Marianne from Gilligan's Island. Or on Ghost Watch. I was really into Ghost Watch. I was like, oh, man, they're doing a really good job of presenting it. And then all of a sudden, they had one of the guys from Red Dwarf come up as one of the reporters. And immediately I was taken out because I'm like, oh, man. Like, don't get me wrong. It was still phenomenal and it's very effective in what it was trying to do. But that still took me out because all I could think of is him yelling at Lister and saying Schmeghead a lot.
And that's the thing. Found footage also kind of became in a lot of sense, like the modern based on a true story, because if it's archival or found footage, we're inclined to believe that it's real. So like another one I saw recently, a great example of kind of the found footage bleeding into based on a true story was this Japanese found footage movie I saw called Noroi the Curse, which presents itself as a straight up documentary and even has like footage from like Japanese talk shows and game shows and like shorts and other stuff, but with the supernatural element. So it does have kind of those documentary transition stuff like the footage was compiled from X and it's from this time, and that's the thing, it could be more about framing than just outright saying it's based on a true story.
So narrative speaking, I think we're all in agreement it's better to kind of show and make you through cinematic techniques and whatnot that it's real, or to at least bring you take away that suspense of belief. But going back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning, what do you guys think of the ethical points surrounding basing horror movies off of actual events, taking stuff that actually happened and kind of turning it, kind of running free with it, but also taking it to another level where do you guys think it's disrespectful in some ways, or? That's
exactly what that's the word I was going to use. It's kind of disrespectful to the real people it happened to. Like, here's an example. One of my favorite movies of the 2010s is Compliance. And it is based on actual events. And the movie actually, it's about a girl who works at it's like a chicken sandwich shop. And her boss gets... Yeah, her boss gets a call saying the blonde girl who's working the register stole money from me. So her boss calls her into the office, and the guy who calls is pretending to be a cop. Says she stole money from this woman who called us. So this cop, and it's played by Pat Healy, he's telling this manager to like strip search her and do all this horrible stuff to this poor girl who is innocent, and she's innocent from the beginning. So the thing is, it's so unbelievable that, and coupled with the fact that based on a true story is such an overused buzz phrase, I guess, that, you know, you're watching Compliance, you're like, oh, this would never happen. This is not how this happened. But it's pretty close to what actually happened in real life. You know, you can look up the case. I think it might have been a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Burger King, or maybe both, because the guy was, he did it to more people than just the one that the movie's based on. But, you know, you're thinking about this girl that this happened to, and people, you know, if people somehow find out that, you know, this movie's about her case, they're like, oh, that didn't happen. It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's pretty close to how it happened. So it's a little disrespectful to the real people involved, I think, to tell the story. I think it's more disrespectful to embellish it, but the fact that nobody, you know, based on a true story, people expect that embellishment now. So even when the movie is pretty close to actual events, you know, like, I mean, it's not horror, but Argo. You know, Argo is pretty close to what happened right up until the end. And then you're like, nah, you know, and that kind of takes you out of the whole thing. You're like, you know, there wasn't this big showdown on the runway, you know, as they're, you know, oh, just missed them, you know.
Well, so. Also with Argo, it was actually the Canadian government that did like 98% of the work, not the American government. So it's, what are the motives behind that? Another example is one that we've talked about in a pretty recent episode, and I brought up earlier, Witchfinder General, because that one is pretty accurate to what Vincent Price's character actually did back then and how it played out. But it's not super factual, especially the ending, because at the end, you know, you have your big hero versus villain showdown where the hero, they say triumphs, but based on that acting, holy crap, I don't think anyone got out of that situation triumphantly. But that's not what happened. The guy died at a ripe age of 30 from, like, I don't know, some like disease or something. Like he was able to retire peacefully, even though he killed over 200 people, charging them of witchcraft in a 3-year span. When in England, no, it was like 300 to 400, I think, 600 people in England were killed for witchcraft over the span of like 100 years. And in that 2 or 3 years that he was actually the Witchfinder General, he killed like 300 or 400. Like, it's a ridiculous number. And actually his books on witchcraft helped inspire the Salem witch trials in New England. So like this, so does having that happy ending of the hero triumphing, yes, it does pay off for the audience because you're giving that happy ending, you're giving that moment of triumph and good versus evil. But is it disrespectful to the impact that this man had on so many lives to not show like, hey, he got away with all this. He actually, like, was, you know, for that time and what he did, he was able to live the rest of his life relatively unscathed by it and actually made a lot of money off of the whole situation.
I think you bring up a good point where I think a lot of times in horror movies, when they say based on actual events, it's actually characters based on actual people. Because when you say Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, Leatherface is Ed Gein, but also Buffalo Bill is Ed Gein, and Norman Bates is Ed Gein, you know, that kind of a deal.
It's really more inspired.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like they're basing these characters on real people. But, like, you know, none of the events of those movies actually took place. I mean, if you know, there's a whole Ed Gein movie if you really want to see the Ed Gein story.
Right. Is that the one? No, I was going to say, is that the one with Jeremy Renner? But that's Dahmer.
No, I think, I want to say, is Kane Hodder in the Ed Gein movie?
He's in a Ed Gein movie.
An Ed Gein movie. Maybe not the one I'm thinking.
I think there's a few.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, and one that comes to mind in terms of based on true events that kind of brushes with horror, Fargo,
right?
Oh, because you know that one, you know, outright starts with it saying that it's based off a true story, but all the names have been changed. Of course, it wasn't actually based off of anything that actually happened, and it's funny because, you know, that snowballed into. You know, there's that urban legend about a Japanese woman actually going to Fargo, North Dakota to try and find the treasure, and supposedly she died.
Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, Kimiko the Treasure Hunter, which itself was based off that story. So again, you know, just kind of snowballed after that. But yeah, the woman, there was an actual woman who did go to Fargo, North Dakota, but she wasn't trying to find the treasure. She just was suicidal and killed herself in the snow.
But Kimiko wanted to find the lost treasure.
And that they said was also based off of a true story, which it was in part. So it is kind of funny that the fiction created an actual event that was itself then based off of into a fiction.
And it's also not just like people you can base it off. There was that horror film that took place a few years ago in the Suicide Forest, and they casted one of the actresses from Game of Thrones. What was that called again?
Just the forest.
So that was based off of a place that is actually like, it's a real place, and like, you know, there is that phenomenon of just a lot of people going there to you know, commit suicide. And is that respectful? I thought that was disrespectful, like this like very tragic phenomenon that's happening in this one place, and then to not only make a horror movie out of it, but to make one that isn't really that is that kind of a trope we see a lot, where it's a like white Western character going into a, you know, foreign place, and then suddenly this thing that's very important and very regional, it becomes about, you know, this Westerner who's in that strange environment, you know?
Right.
It's I thought that was very disrespectful.
And that kind of reminds me, like, the inspiration for Eli Roth's Hostel movies came from a story he heard. Because, again, you know, it's like, it's been a while since I've seen the Hostel movies, but did they say that they were based on true events or anything?
I don't remember them advertising it as being based on true events.
Right, but the story behind it is one of those things, because it was inspired by something Eli Roth supposedly heard, because like he was backpacking or something, and he heard for a friend. I think he was. Well, I don't remember where he was, but he was traveling through Europe or something, and he said that somebody told him about a place where you could pay money to shoot somebody in the head, and that's kind of what sparked the idea for Hostel. So it is interesting, you know, dividing the line between based on a true event and, you know, like just being inspired by true events, or even just inspired by stories. Because I'm not really 100% sure on if that's true or not, but, you know, it's just these things kind of snowball. You know, like you hear about something or you see something in the news, and an entire franchise can be built around it.
I think for me, at least, and this isn't like, you know, the ultimate judgment on whether or not inspired or based on true stories is ethical or what have you, but I think it's okay to take inspiration. I think it's okay to read something in the news, like about, you know, for one example we keep bringing up, to read about someone like Ed Gein, and then for your you know, for your story to create someone like Buffalo Bill that's inspired by it, but you're not just only just being disrespectful to the victims, but you're not sensationalizing the killer. I mean, there was that whole uproar about people fawning over Zac Efron as
Ted Bundy.
I mean, how often does that happen where, you know, a serial killer, you know, something is based on, and they're like, oh, he's dreamy, maybe he wasn't. It's like, no, that's Ted Bundy you're talking about. Jesus Christ.
But Ted Bundy, I don't know if you remember. I mean, I was very young when the Ted Bundy stuff went down, but I remember people were fawning over him. I mean, he had groupies, because, you know, he was just so charming and attractive. So, I mean, that was part of the Ted Bundy phenomenon, was women fawning all over him. You know, people, I'll wait for you, get out of jail, I'll marry you. You know, it's like, okay, you know what this guy does to his women, right? You know.
I mean, how many times has Charles Manson been married since he was in prison? I think it was at least once or twice, maybe, right?
When he's in prison? Maybe once. I don't know, though. I know he has kids from before the murders, because one of them actually, I think his name might have been Charles Manson Jr., and he killed himself. And then the other one changed his name because he didn't want to. How would you like to be Charles Manson's kid? That's gotta be rough. Totally. That would be like, how would you like to be Adolf Hitler's kid? I don't know if Hitler had any kids, but you know, it's one of those things. It's like,
and that's another aspect, is those are just associated with it. So by, is it ethical to sensationalize these tragic events when there's people who are truly affected by it? I'm sure Charles Manson's kids aren't too happy that he keeps getting brought up, or that, that there's more movies coming out that are sensationalizing it. I mean, what about that Haunting of Sharon Tate movie where there's ghosts and stuff? Like, that was an actual person that got murdered, and then you're going to turn it into their tragic demise into a ghost story?
Yeah, played by Hilary Duff.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think the thing about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was, at least, Tarantino actually went to Sharon Tate's sister and family and ran it by them for their approval first.
Which he did not do for Polanski or Bruce Lee.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I think his treatment of Sharon Tate, I thought was, I mean, I liked the character. There was a stink after its premiere where some woman asked, you have this Academy Award caliber actress in Margot Robbie and you don't give her any lines, and I reject your hypothesis. It's like, well, yeah, she doesn't have that many lines in the movie, but she doesn't need them. I mean, Margot Robbie spends a lot of the movie just dancing. And you know what? It's great that way, because she's at a party, she's at a club, she's in her bedroom putting on a Paul Revere and the Raiders record, and she's dancing. I don't know. I don't understand people who think that characters need a lot of lines to be developed. It's like, no, we know all we need to know about Sharon Tate from what Margot Robbie did with her. But now we're getting off topic.
Bet.
So it might be a good time to reel this one in. Have any final thoughts?
Okay, well, I guess as it came up, as we discussed, we have to kind of look at the lines between like something actually being based off a true event, or being inspired by a true event, or sensationalizing a true event, which in a lot of ways also kind of goes into the realm of exploitation, which didn't bring up as much. But yeah, I mean, historical fiction is really big nowadays, so I guess kind of depends on how it's handled or what the event is. Just kind of depends on a case by case basis. And and in horror, like I feel like historical horror and fiction or stuff based off of true events are still pretty popular, because what's more terrifying than the real world or real events?
Well, and a lot of these based on actual events, I think that a lot of the actual events may not be known, so they have to fill in the gaps creatively, and that's where I think you get a lot of people going, that didn't happen. It's like, well, how do you know? No one knows. This is just this writer's idea of what might have happened. So
for me, I think at the end of the day, it's how you present it. Are you presenting this story as a fact with evidence, or are you presenting it as a narrative that is inspired by facts and there's liberties taken? But does that mean all movies that are based off of something that happened have to have a disclaimer saying not everything that happened in this happened the way it is? Or, can we just accept the fact that, they're going to change things to, because if there is no satisfying third act to a story, so, a writer's going to create it. So I think the responsibility is not only on the creators, but as we as an audience to call out movies that do sensationalize and do exploit, to a disrespectful degree.
Cool. All right, and with that, let's call this an episode. Our music is Restless Spirit, and if you haven't checked out their new album, check it out. There's a version of our theme song on it. Our artwork is Chris Fisher, and if you haven't checked his artwork out, track him down, check that out. Me, James J. Edwards, you can find me on the Twitters at Cinema Verite. That's like verite, but with fear, so it's Fearite. Where can we find you guys? Jacob?
You can find me on Twitter at Jacob Davison _. That is at JACOB DAVISON _.
And Korea?
And I'm Jonathan Korea. You can find me at Korean Barbecue on Twitter and Instagram. That's CORREIANBBQ.
And you can find all of us at the Eye on Horror Facebook page. You can find Korea at least on the Stardust app for iHorror. You can find all of us at iHorror.com. You can find all of us at the iHorror.com Facebook page. We're easy to get a hold of if you have anything to say. Jacob has something to plug that he has been suspiciously silent about. You want to tell him about Dead Time Stories?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Or do you not?
I do want to plug it. I'm just bashful is all. I've actually been writing a horror anthology podcast series. It's kind of a podcast anthology, Tales from the Crypt style series for Ranker.com. It's called Dead Time Stories. You can find it online through iTunes, Google Play, and all sorts of platforms. And I wrote a couple episodes recently that I think have some pretty fun stories in them. So if you can, subscribe, review, and rate it. And got some more stories in the pipeline.
There are like 4 or 5 different podcasts called Dead Time Stories. The one you're looking for has like purple artwork with a skull. It says Dead Time Stories, and it's a Ranker one because there are a bunch of Dead Time that are called Dead Time Stories. So,
all right. Well, we could probably post a link on the Eye on Horror page.
Okay, yeah, that'll make it easy to find. We Korea is going to be hitting the road for his job, so we are hoping that we're going to be able to record while he's on the road. But if we get a little less consistent than normal, that's the reason why. And if we do get a little less consistent than normal, you can go listen to Dead Time Stories if you miss us, because not only did Jacob, at least the episode I listened to, not only did he write, he actually voice acted in one of them. So if you're missing Jacob's voice, go listen to Dead Time Stories, and that might give you a little bit of your fix.
So Jacob, you acted.
I did.
Oh,
I'm a Renaissance man.
I guess we're gonna have to listen to it while I'm on the plane.
Oh, please do, please do.
All right, so we're gonna get out of here. We'll see you hopefully in a couple weeks. For me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
And I'm Jonathan Correa.
Keep your eye on horror.